Alfred Molina, welcome to Cultural Attaché. I'm glad we could talk about Inherit the Wind.
Thank you for inviting me, Craig.
I would like to start by asking about the resonance that this play still has 68 years after its debut, because to me, in rereading the play this weekend, it seems more reflective of our world today than perhaps it was back in 1955.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's one of the reasons that the play, I think, has been something that Danny Feldman, the artistic director at the Playhouse, has been wanting to do, precisely because of that, the timeliness of it. We are now, the play is about, you know, the schism between the state and the church, between the teaching of evolution and creationism, all of these things which were hot button topics at the time still are, particularly book banning. And I think that the resonance of the play is what is taking audiences by surprise, because I think the play has a huge reputation, partly because of the movie version, which of course had these two titanic performances by Spencer Tracy and Frederick March. And I think a lot of people still have that image in their minds when they think of Inherit the Wind. These two giant lawyers kind of coming together and like clashing over whether evolution should be taught or not. And suddenly we're now in a world where we're having very, very similar conversations, not just here in America, globally. But I think there is still this notion, there's still this kind of image of the play as being a bit of a creaky warhorse. It's an old play. It carries with it a kind of style and sensibility that was, very fashionable and current in the mid '50s. But now, we're used to a more streamlined kind of theatre, maybe is what a good way of putting it. But I think what audiences will find in our production is that when I say modernized, we haven't modernized it. We haven't changed the dialogue. There are still references that are, we're still talking about things that were current in the early 20th century. But the approach to it is we've taken a broom and cleared away some of the dustier areas of it, and we've done this obviously with the support and permission of the estates of Jerome Lawrence and Robert E. Lee, the original writers. And I think what we've discovered is a play that speaks very much to us now, and not just in obvious ways, but also in very very subtle ways. I mean, there's a wonderful moment in the play, for instance, when I interrupt. Colonel Brady to remind him that there are no ladies in the jury, and which, when I first read it, I kind of went, "Wow, that's that's going to be an interesting detail for an audience, particularly if we've got if we have ladies sitting in the jury box that we have as part of our design. It's they weren't always welcome, and there's lots of social and cultural points in the play that really show how far we've come, but also at the same time how far we've still got to go.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the things that resonated most with me in rereading it, and I've certainly seen the movie multiple times, but as with the Scopes trial on which it was based, in spite of a blistering defense by Clarence Darrow in the real courtroom drama, and by Drummond for Bertram Cates in the play, no matter how compelling, no matter how persuasive, people's opinions were not going to be changed. There was nothing you could do. And as I'm reading this and being reminded of it, I'm just thinking, God, we're so entrenched in our beliefs today that I just don't think we've gotten very far.
Yeah. And also, the play also makes a case for, if you can't change someone's mind, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong or that you are wrong. That, two points of view can coexist in a society and a culture that can still function. It's not it. I mean, just speaking, hypothetically, you and I could have a huge difference of opinion, about something that we both feel is absolutely central and fundamental to our lives, but we can still go to the same coffee shop.
We
You know,
should
we
still have a conversation as well. I mean, there
exactly,
should be afforded the respect
yeah,
that comes
exactly.
along with different opinions.
Yeah. And I think that's what the play I think hits on now for a modern for a contemporary audience. Excuse me, for a contemporary audience, I think that element in the play is almost as hard hitting as any of the issues that it talks about in terms of the trial.
Now, in the play, Drummond doesn't make his entrance until we've heard a lot about him. It reminds me a lot of the third man, frankly. You
Yeah,
know, you hear a lot about this character, but you don't know who he is.
yeah,
He's described by various characters as an agnostic, as an agent of darkness, a slouching hulk of a man, as the devil. I mean, I don't
yeah.
need to tell you, but because you know. But when you begin working on your understanding of the character that you're taking on, how much do those descriptions, albeit other people's opinions of him, inform who he is in your mind?
Well, hugely, because I always it's a little thing we learned at drama school. It was an exercise we used to do, which is as you went through a play, you would write down two lists. One list is all the things that other characters say about you, and the other list is all the things that you say about yourself, if at all. And what happens is that usually the best plays are when those two lists completely contradict each other. So if someone says, if someone describes my character as the devil, and I might say something in the play that alludes to I don't know, sort of loving my grandchildren. It's the fact that those two truths, because whoever has described me in negative terms absolutely believes that. And so that duality is really where all the interesting sort of humanity is in a character, because we do this constantly in our own lives. We're constantly contradicting ourselves and being different things to different people. And I think that's part of the richness of theatrical characters, and it's part of the joy of working on these characters, particularly in the theater when you've got the time to do it.
Right. Now, Clarence Darrow is quoted as having said, chase after the truth like all hell, and you're free, and you'll free yourself, even though you never touch its coattails.
Yeah.
Is he correct? And does that apply to an actor putting a character together, whether for film or stage?
It kind of does. It kind of does. It's interesting how that quote of Darrow is slightly massaged in the sense that Drummond in the plays talks about having no belief in reality at all, but belief in truth. And he actually says at one point, sort of realizes that I may prejudice my own client. Reality has no meaning to me whatsoever, but truth has meaning. And I think that for an actor is absolutely crucial, because the fact is that when we're doing a play, what we're doing isn't real at all. It's it's the absolute apex of artifice. But if it's truthful, then it becomes much more authentic. I always kind of slightly kind of wince when I hear actors talking about, oh, this isn't real enough. This doesn't feel real to me. And I always say, it's not supposed to be real. It's supposed to be authentic. And that's a completely different notion. The audience knows it's not real. If you're playing Othello, the audience knows you're not really killing Desdemona. But you have to create an authentic experience for the audience.
Though I'm sure there are actors who had horrible experiences with their Desdemona who would hope that they could have killed her.
I don't know. That certainly was. I don't know.
Well, so is Drummond an honest man, or is he a persuasive man?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think he's an honest man. I think he's honest according to his own lights. He talks about the way he talks about himself in the play suggests that he understands his failings. He understands that what he does has limited effect, but it's important that the work is done. There's a point in the play when young Bertram Cates, who has been found guilty, but is isn't going to jail, and I praise him for having the courage to stand up for what he believed in, and not and that and the fact that he got found guilty is irrelevant, because what he's done is he's started the process to make it easier for other people to do the same thing. And that, I think, for him is a kind of nobility. I also think that he's not above kind of getting a few kidney punches in either. You know, we were, in fact, John and I, John Douglas Thompson, we play opposite each other. We were talking about this the other day in rehearsal, that both men have a kind of nobility in their beliefs, in the purity of their beliefs, in the way that they stick absolutely to their beliefs, but neither of them are above kind of sneaking in a few nasty ones in. And I think that is what makes these characters so wonderfully human. So they're not they're not kind of monoliths, or they're not on a pedestal. They're people who are willing to kind of get into the dust and the dirt in order to sorry, I'm sorry, my phone went off. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get you back. There you are. Sorry, my phone went off and
I
everything
know
kind of.
technology communicates
Forgive
with
me.
each other at our detriment.
So yeah, so I think the fact that they're flawed makes them very, very human and very approachable and relatable to.
Well, and I think that for me, the emotional turning point in terms of my response to Drummond actually happens at the very end, after his adversary has passed away, and how respectful he is of
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
And Hornbeck says to him, "You hypocrite, you fraud, you're more religious than he was."
yeah.
And
Well, I think that there's a real truth to that, because one of the things that the play surprisingly doesn't quite it doesn't quite land as well, or rather it's touched on very, very lightly, is the relationship that they had before this, that Drummond actually was actively supporting Brady in his presidential campaign, and Brady actually says at one point, we were friends once, good friends, and so there's a mutual respect, there's an admiration. There's also, I think, the vestiges of a friendship that maybe has kind of gone a little sour because of events or because of positions that both men have taken, which of course is incredibly prescient. I mean, you think about the way that families have been split up through, having differing political opinions and taking different positions on cultural issues or political issues, and how those schisms seem completely unbridgeable because of it. And I think that wonderful moment at the end when he gets angry at Hornbeck, and he says one of the most beautiful lines I think I've ever, when he says, "A giant once lived in that body." That you can't dismiss someone purely because you disagreed with them. You can't dismiss their life because they happen to take a position that you find completely reprehensible. It's a I think the play is in many ways a plea for tolerance. It's a plea for not necessarily understand. It's not a kumbaya thing about let's all hold hands and kind of be friends. But I think it's that you can as we were saying earlier, you can disagree, but you can still have a conversation. You can have completely opposing views, but you can still use the same dry cleaners. It's that's human.
yeah, we've lost the ability to accept we agree to disagree.
Yeah. This is something which I've been talking a lot about with friends and colleagues, especially in the last few years, about this weird, almost kind of this evaporation of any kind of social discourse. that respectful social discourse. And I we when in the UK we never had we never called it civics, but we never had. I don't remember having classes in school which taught civics and all those things and learning the skill of being able to agree to disagree without any rancor. And I've noticed, for instance, when I go back home, I watch all the political debate shows, I watch all the talk shows, and they are just as kind of ugly and name calling, full of name calling as they are here, and which kind of really saddens me.
Now, a few minutes ago, you talked about actors who wanted things to be real, even though they're not. And I found an interesting interview you gave to The Guardian in 2015. You
Where I
said,
completely contradicted myself.
no, you didn't. No, you said, I don't put myself through some terrible pain or create anguish for myself. That's therapy. Now,
Yeah.
Spencer Tracy, who played Drummond in the film, said the role of an actor is to, quote, know your lines and don't bump into the furniture.
Yeah.
Now, do you share Tracy's perspective, or is it more nuanced than perhaps that quick statement would allow?
Yeah. Well, I think with all due respect to the memory of Mr. Tracy, I think his remark to me sounds like him not wanting to engage in a conversation with this particular journalist. I, I think he may have been thinking, I just don't want to have this conversation again. So he kind of like, but at the same time, of course, it's a great quote. And I've heard it a million times from other actors. Oh, don't ask me. I'm just learning my lines and don't want to bump in the furniture. And there is a certain efficiency to that approach, and certainly no one wants to forget their lines and bump into furniture. It's not something we practice, but there is a certain nuance to it, I do feel that way. I do feel that storytelling in any form, whether it's acting or playing music or dancing, whatever it is, it should be a joyful, creative experience. It shouldn't be one that is anchored in torture or self-doubt or misery. And when you're playing characters who are going through those kind of emotions, when they're going through self-doubt or misery or torture or anguish of any kind, you have to kind of, in a sense, be separate from it. Otherwise, you can't portray it effectively. If you're in it in any way, it seems to me you're, in a sense, denying yourself and the audience a level of authenticity. If you're so lost in the role, then it's psychodrama. It's not entertainment anymore. It's therapy.
Well, you do not shy away from challenging roles. I mean, Drummond is a challenging role. I saw your performance in The Father at Pasadena Playhouse, and I was convinced I was looking at a 17-year-old by the end of the play, and not as a man who started the play. I felt like that journey from beginning to end was I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It was that powerful. How much do you want to continue doing that, tackling these rich, complicated roles?
Well, I'd like to continue doing it as long as I've got two brain cells to rub together, and I can still, avoid bumping into the furniture.
Well, I know.
This is the wonderful thing about acting is that there's no, if the parts are there, and I'm fully aware that, it's not a level playing field. If you were talking to a female actor, they would have a very, very different perspective on this, because that's one of the very unfair things about our industry. But speaking as a male actor, if there are parts that I can play, I'll carry on doing it, until I drop. I mean, I hope, if touch wood, God forbid this doesn't happen, but if something does happen where I find myself unable to fulfill the requirements, then I hope I'll have the grace and the courage to call it a day. But until then, I'm happy to keep doing it.
Well, I think just by virtue of your having said that, you have the grace to acknowledge that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So when we last spoke 9 years ago, you mentioned that Pygmalion was a play you definitely was on your list of things you'd like to do. Does that remain on your list?
It does. It does very much so. I mean, I think it's a wonderful play. There's stuff in the play that and it's a very different thing from the musical version and the movie version. I think a lot of people, when they see, I think a lot of people are often very surprised when they discover that My Fair Lady actually started off as a play, and it's a great role and it's a great story, and it's yes, it's still very much on my list. Absolutely.
Well, this is probably going to sound like torture or a great idea, and you'll have to let me know which one. I would love to see you play Archie Rice in The Entertainer.
Well, that's another play. That's another play I'd love to have a go at. You're hitting all the ones in my top 10. Yeah, no, these are wonderful plays, and they are fascinating characters, and kind of uh, Archie Rice in particular has a kind of tragedy to it that it's very much in the Arthur Miller world. It reminds me very much of characters like the lead character in Death of a Salesman, and so on. There are these roles that have a kind of it's a kind of almost epic tragedy set in a very small domestic, almost banal setting, which of course makes the tragedy even more heartbreaking. I mean, it's all very well to see a king or an emperor brought down, but when it's someone who kind of is living in much more domestic and much more ordinary circumstances, who happens to think he may be an emperor, that is even more heartbreaking somehow.
I read an interesting analysis of the Scopes trial in the Journal of American Studies from May 2021. And Tom Arnold Forster argued that it wasn't just about the debate about scientific progress and religious reaction in that trial, but that it also framed a debate about the relationship between cultural conflict and media spectacle in the United States. And media spectacle today is far greater than it ever would have been in 1955. You have a jury on stage who is going to be up front and get a sense of what a quote unquote trial, however imagined or depicted this might be. But is Forster correct? Is there something more going on here than just what we see as that initial battle of wills about science versus religion?
Yeah, I think that is certainly present in the play. The debate at the heart of the play between science and religion is still very much there. There's also the on another level, there's also the battle between these two men and their egos, and and the people, in a sense, they think or feel they represent. Um, Brady in the play, I don't know about the real person in the Scopes trial, but certainly Brady in the play has a following and plays to that following. He plays to his base. And this is something that we're all very, very aware of now in modern politics. That you throw enough red meat to the base, and they will always follow you. And in a sense, uh, Drummond also has a following, but they just don't happen to be present in the trial. He's very much isolated in the trial. He's surrounded by the enemy, if you like, in quotes. But it's a battle between these two men. It's a battle between their egos. It's a battle, in a sense, between two men who were once friends and who kind of have a history together. As we were saying earlier about the way that Drummond refuses to belittle him after he passes away, so I think there's, and the play is, in a way, the play, and I think the way we've staged it, in a sense, sends a message about how media speculation and media coverage became started to become a huge component in how it affects people's mindset, how it affects people's opinions, how you throw enough media attention on something and you actually can change minds. You can influence the way a person sees something. If they see enough imagery that is, arguing for another position, it may well influence them. It may well persuade them. And I think there's elements of that in the play, and all these things make the play incredibly timely and very relevant now.
And
I was
good to see on stage a year before presidential election in this country.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I wouldn't, not that I know this for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was part of the attraction of doing the play now, that to get this play done now rather than after the election, when it could be accused of sort of just being, just jumping on the bandwagon. We're actually, I mean, if seeing the play sparks off conversation, then we've done our job. I got somebody I know came to see last night's invited dress rehearsal. It's just a dress rehearsal, but we're still working on the play. And he emailed me this morning to say that he was stunned at how much there was in the play that had to be discussed. That there was so much stuff in the play that he was desperate. He said he and his girlfriend were just like yammering on about it all the way home. Kind of, and I think that's brilliant. I love that.
That's the best possible response you could have to any work, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, I want to conclude because you sort of referred to this scene without any specifics about the dialogue or the circumstances, but Drummond does tell Bertram Cates at the end of the play, "You don't suppose this kind of thing is ever finished, do you? Tomorrow it'll be something else."
Yeah, yeah.
What are your hopes that this line will someday be a relic of a time gone by? And what do you think the role of the performing arts is in helping us get to that place?
Well, it's a big question, Craig.
Well, might as well finish big, right?
Sorry. So I thought we were going to finish by me asking you, what's that figure on your shelf?
You could, you know what? That is a wood sculpture that I bought in Oaxaca, Mexico. My husband and I have built a house in Guanajuato, Mexico, which is where I am now. And we're just starting to get it furnished. And I thought we have to have one art piece in the house.
It's rather beautiful.
That one was easy to bubble wrap and bring in a suitcase.
All right, it's lovely. It's lovely.
Thank you.
Well, I think the performing arts should and deserves to have a huge part in the social discourse of any culture, any society. The problem comes when that discourse or that art form becomes completely dominated by money. And and I think there's a problem when you can buy culture, when you can sort of just smother other points of view and other just like drowning it in money. And I think it's why theater is often seen as the sort of poor cousin to movies and television, because it doesn't attract the same sort of numbers in terms of audiences. So what's being discussed, the social discourse that's being provoked by theatrical productions, is sometimes somehow seen as less worthy or less valuable or less useful. But I think if we are truly aiming to be a democracy, then there will always be someone dissenting. That's at the heart of democracy. There will always be someone saying, wait a minute, this isn't working, or wait a minute, this isn't right, and let me tell you why it isn't right. And it's that right to be able to say, this is, hear my voice, that's being kind of drowned out by money. And so if someone's going to the theater and experiencing a play where you're seeing characters or stories that are basically saying this, hear my voice, I think that's a really important value that theatre can, that the performing arts can offer. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does, absolutely. And I think as long as theater is entrusted to your voice and others who are equally passionate about their craft, we'll constantly have those conversations.
I hope so. I hope so. I would hate it. I would hate it if we reached a point where in the social discourse everyone just kind of went, okay, that's it, we're done. We've covered everything. Let's, that would be awful. That would be awful because the things constantly change. Democracies change. The way we live our lives change. There's always going to be someone or something that needs to be fixed, something that needs to be improved on, something that needs to be reworked or revalued or just made better. And that's a constant process, and I think that's it's important to be part of that conversation and to welcome it as well. I mean, we're now having conversations about how old should politicians be. Should there be an age limit? Can you trust an 82-year-old person who happens to have a finger on the button, and all that sort of thing. These are conversations that we need to have. I mean, I'm a great believer in the fact that we should all reach a point where we can happily let go. I'm having conversations with my grandkids who are 20 and 18, and we're having conversations about, when is your when, I, I'll give you an example. I was talking to my daughter who's, early 40s, and I said to her, oh, isn't this great? There's going to be a new Beatles single. They've found this song that John Lennon wrote and they've put it through AI and it's all the Beatles performing on the single. It's going to be so. And she just said, when is your generation going to learn to just let go? And that really hit me. And of course, she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. The Beatles are the Beatles. Fantastic. Love them. Got all their records. Love them. But hanging on to still, you know what I'm saying? I think that's the next big conversation is, and I'm at the younger end of the boomer generation. I'm 70. So that makes me like one of the younger boomers. But, we've got to learn to let go.
We do. But in the meantime, there's a lot still to enjoy that's old
Oh
and
yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not saying don't do any more old plays. I don't want to put myself out of work completely.
well, thank you very much for your time, Alfred. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a
And
pleasure.